All right, we're back. We are COMP305, that is Game Programming 1 in the fall 2019 semester at Centennial. And today we're going to be covering a very special topic, Scriptable Objects, which is an awesome thing for you guys to learn. A couple things to note. What I've done is we're going to start off with the old Mail Pilot game. We're going to go from there. So please download, if you haven't had a chance to do this, Lesson 2B, COMP305 Lesson 2B from GitHub. Let's go there and get it. So again, if I go to github.com and /Centennial College, you'll see that there is a Fall 2019 Lesson 2B, this one. I want you guys to download this lesson. And we're going to modify this lesson and create 9B. I've already done the solution for 9A. And this is going to tie into something that we're going to be doing with today's in-class assignment. So if you look up online, I'm just going to look online here on my other side here. If you look online, today we have a small assignment, a Lab 2. Which is due tomorrow. However, I recommend for the people that are here today or watching live, get it done today, hand it in today. Literally, if you watch the tutorial and you participate, you can hand it in for an easy 5%. Okay, that would be like no stress 5%. Now this is in my opinion, a great little tutorial we're going to do on scriptable objects and what they are. Some people who don't know what scriptable objects are, this is going to be a great addition to your tool set when it comes to Unity. Okay, so please pay attention. Alright, so one more thing before we begin. If we look back at our projects, we also have to talk about, just a moment, we should also talk about our plan for this course, which is slightly altered but not totally altered. Next week, I should mention that if we go with our schedule, week 10 is your beta release plus your peer review 4, which is due next week. So that is worth 10% of your final grade. It's the biggest one to date from your project part. It's almost worth as much as an individual assignment. Please don't hesitate to hand that in on time. It's due next week on Saturday night at midnight, as well as your peer review. I've noticed in the past, some of you have not handed in your peer reviews. This will negatively impact your mark, your final mark. If you don't hand it in, you lose 1% automatically for not handing it in. It's an easy hand-in. You just literally do a peer review of your team and yourself, and then you hand it in. So please don't forget to do this. So that's coming up next week. So we're behind in a couple exercises. This is equivalent to exercise 2, where we've moved off. We had some additional load in the first half of the semester, so I didn't do exercise 2 or exercise 3. So today takes the place of exercise 2. Next week we'll be doing another in-class assignment for Lab 3, which is exercise 3. This will also be 5% of your final grade, so please make sure you either attend, which will make it easier for you, or do the lab, which will be due on the Sunday. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to do that. I know everyone has competing assignments now during this part of the semester, as well as competing priorities. Then there's going to be, during week 11 and 12, so that's week 10 next week, during week 11 and 12, there will be an in-class play testing assignment where you're going to let people play test your beta, right? So that's going to be happening. You'll be given your game over, a link to your game on Discord. You'll be sharing that game, and then what will happen is the other teams in the class will have an opportunity to play your game and give you feedback. From that feedback during week 11 and 12, my hope is for you to get the 5%. You're going to do two things. One, play everybody's game. That's one part. And the second part is, after you play everyone's game and they play your game, take feedback that they've given you and apply it to your game if you can. Even if it's one piece of feedback, something that you've changed from the feedback that you're getting. And we'll talk about how to construct a some proper questions to ask for your game, because every game is going to have different questions to answer. Okay? And then finally, in week 13, we're going to hit our final release. Our final release is also worth 10%, and that'll be the end of your project in terms of development. So development will cease week 13. There'll be no more development. Week 14 will be just your presentation. For you to get marks for your presentation, even if you're part of a team, you must attend. This is going to take the place of your final exam. So if you don't attend, even if you participated, unfortunately you don't get any marks for it. You won't get any marks if you don't participate. This is like you not attending your exam. So please make sure you book it now, make your priorities happen. I know some people are working on Saturdays. For the final week, which is week 14, you must attend in order for you to get full marks for your final presentation. This is the final part of your project, which sums up everything nicely for your for the course. Okay, so that's what's happening in terms of just an update of where we are. But today, what we're doing is we're talking about scriptable objects. So again, please download lesson 2B, and then what we can do is we can take 2B and we can make lesson 9B in a second. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing. So here's, let's suppose I've downloaded 2B, and I'm just going to go to, and guys, please slow me down. The people that are in the class, slow me down, because I want you guys all to have a chance to get this done. You know, otherwise what's going to happen is I'm going to just keep going, and then you know, you'll have homework for tomorrow, and I don't want to give you homework. I want you to be able to do this stuff in class, so there's nothing for you to do. This is the idea here, as opposed to, you know, you having to take something home. I don't want you guys to take something home unless you have to. And I'm telling you, if you follow the examples today in class, there should be no issues in terms of you getting it done. Yeah.
Did you update 2B earlier?
Yeah.
Because I noticed it was only 4 hours ago.
Yes. Yes. You download 2B. Download 2B, this latest version, and then you'll have the one that you can do for your lab today. Alright, so I'm just going to rename lesson 2B. I've just, let's say, downloaded it equivalently. I'm going to go COMP305, F2019, and it's going to be lesson 9B. Yours should be named differently than this. If you look at the online portion of the assignment, it says that using the project template presented in class, COMP305, F2019, lesson 9A or B, it's up to you, right? And you guys are the B team that I'm recording. So you're going to take 2B and make it into your lab. You should call it COMP305, F2019, lab 2, and then your student ID, whatever that is, okay? That's what you're going to submit. It's only a link to GitHub that I want. I don't want, like, project files and all that stuff. It's got to be a working link to GitHub. So if you give me nothing, if you haven't mastered GitHub by now and you don't know how to hand me a GitHub link, sorry, I can't give you a mark. But by this point now, we're sitting at week 9, you need to know how to use GitHub, all right? So the way it's going to work is this. You're going to take the template that I'm going to give you, and you're going to create scriptable objects for 2 components, the scoreboard, which I'm going to show you, as well as your scene settings. Okay, those 2 things. I'm going to show you what to do. I also would like you, if you could, to put a comment header on each of your files that you modify with at least your name and your student ID, so I know it's you. Okay, so those 2 things. And that's it. So this is like a one-shot. I don't want you to work really, really hard on this. That's why if you follow along, I think you'll learn what to do when it comes to scriptable objects, which is a great little thing, as well as you'll have a chance to hand something in fairly quickly and a fairly easy assignment. So let's talk about scriptable objects a little bit. So if I look at scriptable objects Unity, if I look that up, and again, you can see there's lots of tutorials up online. But let's look at the Unity API documentation. So if you look at what it is, it says a class you can derive from if you want to create objects that don't need to be attached to game objects. In fact, one thing that we can talk about when it comes to scriptable objects is you cannot attach them to game objects. Okay, so first of all, you're going to be like, well, what's the difference between a scriptable object and just a regular class then? Well, yes, you can make a regular class, but imagine if you could see all your class properties on the editor without actually having them attached to any game objects whatsoever. And you're going to be like, well, what's the use case for that? I'm going to show you. Okay. Again, what it says is this is the most useful for assets which are only meant to store data. If I want to store data, or if I want to have configuration files, this is where scriptable objects are awesome. All right. It'll save us hard coding our data. We don't want to hard code our data every single time. When you hard code something in script, what happens is when you pass your script along to somebody else, right, or if you have to change something or add a new scene or do some kind of changes, it makes your life a little bit more difficult. One thing to note about scriptable objects, you do not have the regular lifecycle functions that you do in other objects. So you don't have update or start. Those are not available in scriptable objects. Okay, so you can't do update and start from that perspective. However, there are some other messages you can use. You can use wake, on destroy, on disable, on enable. For the most part, I don't use these things, right? But you can. Sometimes these are required. You also have some basic public methods, get instance and toString. But for the most part, you can see that there's not a lot that is included from mono behavior. In fact, this does not inherit from mono behavior. It inherits from scriptable objects. If I switch to the manual for this one, you can see that it gives you some examples of what scriptable objects look like. One of the things you're going to notice is there's this attribute that we're going to have to put in place for scriptable objects called create asset menu. So there's two parts of a scriptable object. Okay, so this is like an intro here, right? One part of a scriptable object is the actual blueprint class, almost like a prototype. I make a prototype class which just holds data members. So normally we don't have any methods with this or anything, all right? Because remember, all we're going to use a scriptable object for is to store data, right? And then what I'm going to do is I want to create an instance of that class, a concrete instance of that class that I can physically see as an asset in the assets folder, okay? So why is that good? Because then in the assets folder I have editor access. That means I can modify stuff live in the assets folder, right? And I can reference those objects in my code. Now we have a couple of use cases that we're going to use today for this assignment that's going to be due. One of them is Scoreboard. Remember what we've been doing so far is we've used don't destroy on load, which is kind of not deprecated, but I'm going to say that Unity doesn't look good on that. They kind of say, you know, we're probably going to remove that at some point. Don't destroy on load. And the other thing that we're doing, which is not great either, is we have this switch case statement that we have a lot of little settings that we put in our switch case to move from one scene to the other scene. That's also not great, because what's going to happen is those are all hard-coded values. So those two use cases are the things we're going to replace with scriptable objects, okay? One thing to note, if you save something to a scriptable object, it persists. It's like persistent data, almost like a data file that you're saving to. So if I want to save player settings, player statistics, level statistics, level data, all that kind of stuff, I can save it in a scriptable object, and it will persist between game loads. So I load my game up, I put stuff in a scriptable object, for example, where the player left off last time, it persists. I can load that stuff back in, right? For high score, for all kinds of stuff, right? Which is pretty awesome. That means I don't really need to do file management, not necessarily 100%. I mean, there's still use cases for file management, absolutely, and databases, and you know all this other stuff. But from a settings perspective, scriptable object is pretty awesome. So there's two parts to it. One, we make the blueprint. We use this little directive, which is create asset menu. We specify a default file name that's going to be created in the assets folder. In this case, they're just calling it data. And then a menu item. How does the menu look when you open up the editor? And you can also decide on what order the menu is going to appear in. So I'll talk about that. That's one part. And then the second part is using a scriptable object, which is referencing it, which we're going to get to in a second. So two parts. Let's start doing this thing. So again, my assumption is you've downloaded the project from GitHub, you've got lesson 2B, and you've created lesson 9B from it, or in your case, you'll be creating COMP305 F2019-Lab 2. Please do that right now. Set up your GitHub, so when we get going, then literally all you have to do at the end of the class is just hand it in. That's what I want you guys to do. Nice and simple and easy. Everyone's going to be happy with an easy 5%. Okay, that's what I want you guys to do. So I'll wait a few seconds for you guys to do that. Also, please slow me down, stop me. I'm not checking Discord, but if I can assign somebody for this one to check Discord for me, is there somebody who's willing to check Discord for any questions that come up? How about Kevin? Kevin, can you do that for me? So if anyone asks questions, please ask in the general channel, and then we have our friend Kevin here who's going to basically put up his hand and let me know the questions are happening, because I can't really check Discord at the same time I'm doing this. It'll be too crazy, and I don't want to reveal Discord names and all that stuff on YouTube. So please just check with me first, and then we'll go from there. And yes, I could probably pull it up on a second screen, but I don't want to. Alright, so yeah, so I have this lesson 9b. I'm going to pull up Unity Hub. And hopefully now you guys are also using, I'm hoping you guys are using Colab, but some people aren't, I know. They don't want to do it, or they have another workflow, that's fine. But I'm going to put up lesson 9b. I'm calling it 9b. You guys are going to call it lab 2, right? And I'm selecting this folder. One thing I also want to do with that lesson, whenever I prepare a copy of a lesson, or a copy of something, I'm going to go into that lesson. Remember that I want to remove the remote, and I want to place a new remote with a new repo. So I'm just going to do that prep right now while you guys are getting ready. So desktop, and I got them under Unity projects. You can have them wherever you want. Again, I'm just giving you a chance to catch up for people that are just coming in. I want to get remote, remove origin, and if it doesn't exist, it's gonna complain like this. Or is it get remote? Let me see. Not a Git repository. Yeah, haha, that would be good. COMP305 lesson 9b. I'll be okay. And get remote, remove, COMP305. Okay, and the reason why I removed the remote is because I'm pointing this to, I'm making a copy of my previous project, and I want to point it to a new repository. Okay, so here I'm going to go up online. I'm going to make a new repo for this. By the way, I will be periodically pushing to GitHub. So this is, like I said, a real easy 5% if you follow along. So COMP305 F2019, and it's lesson 9b. So I'm going to be not updating 9b going forward. And then all I need is these two last little lines of code, which I'm going to publish. So this right now is the last version. 9b is what you should be following if I'm going too fast, because it's going to be, all my code is going to be up there very shortly. Okay, so that's 9b. And under my Unity projects, I'm going to pull up lesson 9b, and I'm going to remind you guys where we were. Now, this is the project that led into our midterm test as well, right? But I've removed any other level. We've only got the initial levels again. So what I have right now, if I run this thing, when it works, is the following. It's just this, right? I have mail pilot, got a few clouds, I run around, and then I do this kind of thing. And then what ends up happening is I might be able to collect a high score of a couple hundred, or die. There we go, I died. And you can see I have a high score of 100 right here, right? But the problem is I got this do not destroy unload thing, which is a real pain in the ass for working with. Why? Because that means I can only test without getting a reference error, as an example, a null reference error, by testing with the start scene first. I got to start at the start scene, take a look. I mean, I'm in the start scene. And if I want to modify in the main scene, I really can't start from the main scene because it requires Scoreboard, which is a really big problem. In fact, I have a Scoreboard game object that's right here, and it has a couple of pieces of information, some data. But this data, guys, is completely useless. It doesn't do anything for us in the Scoreboard, right? So I want to think about a way to change my Scoreboard out to make it so that I can use Scriptable Objects. Let's take a look at the code that I have first, just to give a refresher on where we're at. So if we look at Game Controller, let's take a look at this. In Game Controller, we have a bunch of, and I'll let Visual Studio update. By the way, for those people who are going to see these extra marks, like we talked about last time when we did this video, I'm using C Sharper, right? Which is, or ReSharper, which is something that you can get free from the JetBrains website. If you're a student, I highly recommend it. It gives you some suggestions of what you can change. For example, it's saying, hey, you don't, Tom, you don't need to make these all public. You can make them private. And yes, I could if I wanted to. So if you notice, as I go down, I have some stuff here. I've also got some extra code for as examples, and I'm going to talk about these extra pieces of code. So I've got my setters and getters, and if I scroll down, you can see what happens. I want to have my scoreboard. Here's my scoreboard. I get a reference to my scoreboard up here. This is line 97, and my reference to my scoreboard works on that game object. And then what I'm doing is I'm updating my scoreboard. And then I got this real ugly section right here. This is a terrible section. And like I told you guys when we were building this together, I said, guys, there's a lot of duplication here. This has to change. And whenever, if you listen to what I'm ever telling you, if you can take one thing from me, once we duplicate code, in your mind, you got to think, this must be a better way. Because remember, we want to follow the drive principle at all times, which is, do not repeat yourself. We don't want to repeat. If we repeat ourselves in code like this, that means we could be doing things better and differently, right? So there's a way we're gonna be talking about today to make this better. So a couple things we're gonna do. So one is we want to get rid of this persistent do not destroy unload. And if you look at the bottom of this piece of script, which is the bottom of gamecontroller.cs, you can see that there's a line here that says don't destroy unload. We want to get rid of this line. This is bad, bad, bad. Why? It persists a game object between scenes. This is one of the earlier versions, the way Unity used to do it. Okay? Now, one thing to mention is this. Remember what Unity is. Wait, maybe I've talked about this before. Unity is a managed, scriptable game engine that uses C# on the front end as a script engine, only for scriptable objects, right? And on the back end, it natively it's C++, which means you have a managed side and you have an unmanaged native side. The unmanaged native side, and hopefully in game programming 2, you'll be making your own C++ plugin. I'm hoping that you'll be doing that one day if they ever give me a chance to do C++ with you guys. And there is a plan for us to move some of our courses to a C++ in the later parts. Then what you would do is you create a C++ plugin that connects your native side, which is C++, to your managed side, which is C#. And the two will communicate with each other. So what this does is says this, hey, don't destroy unload is like telling C++, keep your references. Don't drop that pointer that looks at that particular object in the hierarchy. Keep that object in play. Don't delete it. Don't clean up the memory. I want to reuse that thing over and over again. That can be quite dangerous if you think about it between scenes, right? Now, they make it not dangerous. It's something that people do all the time. But I think there's better ways of doing it than like this. This is a bad way of doing it. We did it because it was the easier way of doing it. But remember that easier is not always better. In fact, most of the time it's not. Anything that is good is never easy. Let's keep going. So that's one thing, right? We have this area we're going to change, but the first area I want to change is the idea of our scoreboard. So what I really want, because the only thing that's really persisting is our scoreboard. So if you look at our scoreboard, this scoreboard right here, which is a game object that's inside the start scene, is actually persisting from one scene to the next. It's almost like I'm carrying that start scene, the scoreboard over and over again. Guys, that is like not good. I don't want to do that. So I want to remove the scoreboard. For now, let's just disable it. I'm just going to deactivate it. This is the first part of your lab. So I'm deactivating the scoreboard, number one. Next, inside of your scripts area, there is a scoreboard script, scoreboard.c#. Let's do that. So you notice it's exactly what I said it was. It's really just data, but in this case, we've left it at mono behavior. Guys, mono behavior, bad. Why? It carries a lot of baggage that we don't need, right? What we want to do is we want to change this out, swap this out, and we want to make this into scriptable object. Let's change this. Scriptable object, please. So it becomes a scriptable object. It means we cannot attach it anymore to a file. We cannot attach it to a game object. Scriptable objects, game objects, they don't play nice. That's number one. Two. We want to make it, we'll leave this system serializable here, it won't hurt us. What we want to do next is we want to add a create menu. So we're going to go up here and add another directive where it's create asset menu. Take a look. Create asset menu. If you open up a bracket, it'll say this. We need two things, file name and menu name. Our file name is going to be called Scoreboard. That is like a default file name that'll come up. You'll see in a second what this means. And then our menu name is going to be the new menu we're going to create in the editor, because we're modifying the editor here, which we're going to create something called Game Scoreboard. I'll make it Scoreboard. Alright, so if I just did this, and save the game, save this little script. So now all we've changed is line 5, we've changed the directive, we've added a directive up here for create asset menu. And in line 7, we moved from mono behavior to scriptable object. Okay, those are the two things we've done. Are you with me? Kevin, can you check Discord? Are they with us? They're all good to go? So if I do that and save, if I go back to Unity, now I have this situation. And let me just kill, I don't know why I have two instances of Unity running, but that's fine. If we go back to Unity, you can see if I go to the editor, if I go to assets, if I go to create, you can see now I have a brand new menu up here called game. You see that? And then I have Scoreboard. That's the name of the file that I'm making. So game Scoreboard. This is a brand new thing on the editor. It allows me to make my own customizable asset. Okay, and I'm putting it inside of my scripts folder. Watch. I make it and it creates a new asset that sits inside of my scripts called Scoreboard. I'm just going to leave it the same name. But look over here what I'm getting. Inside the scripts, not inside the hierarchy, I have an editor that I can modify. Why is this good? Because I can modify the the settings here. I don't have to have it part of my hierarchy anymore, right? So imagine I can have anything that I want to modify, tweak, whatever, inside the editor now, which is really cool. So I have three things. I have high score, lives, and score. That's part of it. But now I have this scoreboard object. Okay? This changes things from my game controller. In my game controller class now, we're going to have some issues. Okay? One thing is, if you notice, scrolling down, we have this game object Scoreboard. Scoreboard is not a game object. Scoreboard is a scriptable object. So this is incorrect. We're not going to have a good reference going on here anymore. And also, we have UI controls here. What I'd rather do is create another header. Let's do this. And we're going to make another header called, game settings. Here's our game settings. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it out, put it back down here. And instead of making it a game object, let's change the type to Scoreboard. It's actually a type now. Now, notice that I have a few errors here now. I have a few errors that are coming up on my little fat scroll bar, right? Here's my map. This is almost like a little scroll map. And I can see where the errors are. So here's the first error. Well, why would this be an error? Well, because Scoreboard is not part of a game object. There is no get component anymore, remember? So I guess got to take this part out. Doop, like this. So no more Scoreboard get component. We can take those parts out. We don't need it anymore because it's not part of a game object. Cool. I also have this little code that we can take out.
Sorry, can you go back up to where you have the game settings?
Sure. All I did was say public scoreboard. And then what this does is I'm going to require a reference to the Scoreboard scriptable object. That's what this is, right in a second. A couple ways to get to the reference. One way is dragging and dropping, which is what we're going to do. Alright, if I scroll down, you can see now that I have another error. It's here. Scoreboard, I'm trying to get an automatic reference. Now remember, find is not possible. You cannot find the Scoreboard object ever, because find only works in the hierarchy. Find finds game objects. Scoreboard is not a game object, so therefore this cannot ever work. So we got to get rid of that. However, we could try and do something like this. Let me point this out to you. You could do something like this. Scoreboard is equal to resources, find objects of type scoreboard. You could do this as scoreboard. And let me talk about this method and what's good and bad about it. This will work to some degree, but sometimes what Unity does is it loses references. And you might lose a reference to scoreboard using it this way. Let me talk about this. Resources. Unity has been deprecating access to resources now for a while. They don't recommend accessing resources at all. In order for you to find resources, the proper way to do it is to have a resources folder inside of your assets folder. That will guarantee that you can find your resources. I don't have a resources folder in my assets folder. However, I will be able to find a reference to Scoreboard. One thing that this does is it actually looks inside of your assets. So it looks down in here in your assets folder, not in your hierarchy. It actually looks to find prefabs and anything else, which can be useful. However, Unity doesn't recommend this at all. Also, find objects of type all. Notice the keyword objects. This finds all of the objects. That means it returns an array or list. Okay? I only need the first element of the array because I only have one, and this is pretty ugly code to me, right? Then we're casting it as a scoreboard. So this casts everything as a scoreboard and returns this all back as a reference to scoreboard. So this is one way we could do it. However, I'm just going to comment this out and leave it here. I don't recommend it. I recommend dragging and dropping your scoreboard onto your public area that we created up here, right here into the scoreboard area. We can drag and drop it there. You'll have access to it and it won't break. Okay? So that's another error. Let's go to fix one more error down here. Here's the last error. HighScoreLabel.text is equal to HighScore plus some kind of scoreboard thing. All we need here is just to remove the same thing we removed last time. We don't need a get component. All we need is access to the scoreboard, HighScore property that's inside of our scriptable object. And that's it. So the script is done. So let's review again, just for the people that are watching. 1, you need to make a reference, and I just put it down here on line 43, a reference to your scoreboard scriptable object somewhere. 2, change, modify any kind of errors that come up. For example, inside of your script area, I'm just going to move this away. I don't need this one. Where it says, if I'm comparing the scoreboard high score to the current score, you're not going to do any kind of get component because get components don't exist anymore. Also, I don't need toString in this case. This is a leftover from what it was before, because when I do my string plus something, an integer, it concatenates string and integer and converts this integer to a string. So I don't have to do string here. Okay, and notice it was actually grayed out. Same thing here. Notice this is grayed out because it'll convert integer to a string.
So, hold on, so it's just underscore store, right?
Yeah.
Did we keep the game object where it says game object?
No. No. And also, I recommend on line 103 that scoreboard is equal to resources find objects. This is another way of doing it. I'm leaving it in for your reference. But we're not going to use this method because it's a little buggy at times. You'll lose references. We did that earlier in this first section. So please don't use it this way. Just make a direct drag and drop. Then down here, the last part is on line 133 next to the, in the switch case, which we're going to replace later on. We're just HighScoreLabel.text is equal to the high score plus your scoreboard now. We're reading from the scoreboard and we're kind of injecting it into this high score label. So far so good? So now we have to go back to Unity. On the Unity side, we got to go to the game controller. And the game controller, notice, has a space for the scoreboard entry. We need to drag and drop from the scoreboard and the assets into our game controller. So let's please do that. So again, drag and drop from here into the game controller. So this creates a direct connection. Then finally, I'm going to go up to where it says prefab overrides, and I'm going to click apply all. Why? Because this is going to update the prefab so it works in every scene. On the start scene, the main scene, and the end scene. Wait, there's one more thing we need to do on the scripting side.
Where do we put the object in game controller? I didn't see.
Right here.
Okay,
I'm just dragging and dropping in here. So I'm taking it from the scoreboard and I'm dragging and dropping it back here. Okay. There's one more thing I got to do though. Way on the bottom, notice that this don't destroy on load scoreboard. That will fail because scoreboard is now a scriptable object and you cannot don't destroy on load. So let's get rid of that. So no more of this. Notice also that on start button click and on restart button click is the same, but this is on purpose because remember, one day we're going to replace on restart button click to let us start back where we died last. Not necessarily the first scene, but the last scene we were in. And if we have multiple levels, we want to restart back where we left off, not restart the whole game, okay, necessarily. And that's why I have two of these so we can replace this load scene with something else. I'm not sure if we'll get to that, but that's the intent behind this. Alright, we're ready to go now. So I've updated my game controller. I've turned off scoreboard. I've just unchecked this in my hierarchies because I don't want to see this part. I'm leaving it in so you can see that it's still there, but it's never going to work. Now let's press play. And if everything goes well, you can see that we're good to go. Now we have an error. Even though we've turned off scoreboard, right, it's turned off, it's still trying to attach a non-mono behavior script on top of it. And this can't be, guys. So at this point we need to delete the scoreboard game object. Save. Run it again. Now you're going to see that error going to go away. So now here we go, we have this. Notice that now we're not going to don't destroy on load. We're going to use our scriptable object, this scoreboard right here. Okay, let's watch the scoreboard and see what happens. I'm going to go start. So again, like normal, I'm trying to accumulate score. Notice over here what's happening. I'm actually writing to my scoreboard, and now I have a high score of 200. Wait, let's stop the game. Still got my high score of 200. It saves that in real time as if it's a data file. And in fact, that's what it is. If I run it again now, right? And if I run this game again, notice it persists. So I can kind of run. And then I'm kind of going here. I got 200. And you can see that if I'm lucky, I might be able to increase my high score without dying to something a little bit more. I'm not going to take a chance. Oh, that's death. I'm dead. 600. So now notice my score went to 600. Again, if I stop, my score stays at 600. This is one of the advantages, a beautiful advantage of scriptable objects. I don't destroy on load. Okay, so review. What are scriptable objects then? Two parts. Blueprint, like a class that defines data members we can write and read from. Write to and read from. Two, we have actually an instance that we created by going to the editor, and we went to assets, create, game, and then scoreboard, and we created an instance that we can modify here on the fly. For example, let's say, this is really cool, I don't want 600 to be the high score. I think 2000 should be the high score. So let's put 2000 in there, right? And if I save that and start running it again, right now when I start and go to it, you can see that even if I die, it's going to say the high score is 2000 because it read from the file immediately. This is a good thing, guys. I can set stuff up. So that means we have access to being able to read from our scriptable object and write to our scriptable object. This is a good thing. This is the first part of your lab. Your lab part 1 is complete. Let's go and save this up on GitHub and put it up just in case you missed something. I'll have my code up there so you can download it. I'm going to save the scene. I'm going to go File, Save Project. I'm going to close down Unity. Some people have a problem with GitHub when it comes to this. They forget that they have to close down Unity in order for them to put it up on GitHub properly. If you don't close down Unity and you don't close down Visual Studio, sometimes you'll miss meta references and then you'll lose references in when you put it up on GitHub. So I just close everything down and then go git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added scriptable object for scoreboard. Okay, git push, which will push everything back up to the remote, and now you're up to date. If you look up on GitHub, if I refresh, you can see I have a project that I'm working with, lesson 9b, and the thing I just did is up there for you to look at. Add scriptable object for scoreboard. So this is the first part of your lab. Are you with me?
What do you call it? Stuff to download? So there's nothing, like there's no islands, there's no clouds.
So you did. But the reason why is because you didn't update your game object. Your game controller has to be updated. You have to go into your game controller. Let's go in there. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So for the most part, this is what it is. If I go back to our project, remember always when you modify your script and your game controller and your scene, in my game controller, one day when it updates, in my game controller, I've modified my script, and what I want to do is to go to overrides and click apply all. If I don't do that, then the game object won't be updated, and that means you won't have the connection to your scoreboard. The scoreboard will be missing. You need to have that connection. The connection doesn't come from the hierarchy. The connection comes from here, from the scripts folder. Okay? And that's the part you might be missing.
Yeah, you know, there's such a tiny thing to fix it.
All right? Next part. Now this part is way more involved, and this is way more difficult. So the first part was, hey, here's an intro to scriptable objects. This is how you do kind of basic scriptable objects. Now this part is way more difficult. Why? Because we want to overhaul our code a little bit. All right? And when I mean it, it's a major overhaul of our code, of our game controller. Let me talk about this. So here's my intent, and I want your help here. Okay? So I'm going to go back to my game controller. And in my game controller, I have these hard-coded values, like we talked about. These things. Man, these are ugly. Wouldn't it be nice if we had settings for each of the scenes? And wouldn't it be nice if, this is my to-do list or my wish list, right? Wouldn't it be nice if I don't even need a switch case statement? That somehow the scene detects which one I am and assigns settings according to the settings scriptable objects that I have attached to it. Wouldn't that be nice? In fact, I can avoid switch case altogether using scriptable objects, and the scriptable objects will assign values that have been saved into my my project. That's the way I want it to go. Why? Imagine this. I don't just have 3 scenes. I have 30 scenes. I have 50 scenes. I have 100 scenes. Little side quests, instructions, tutorials, whatever, cinematics, whatever kind of scenes you can possibly think of, right? Scenes that bring up settings, scenes that do other kinds of things. Transition scenes from one scene to another, loading scenes, saving scenes, a bunch of stuff, right? If I had to go through here and add this, another scene to my switch case, man, what terrible code that would be, right? I don't want that. I want my script to update automatically. I add a scene, I add a nice little scriptable object that's accessible through my code. I click on or click off some switches in the editor, and bang, I have everything I need here. Wouldn't that be nice? It's almost like having a little file that I'm reading from my scene file. And by the way, you can extend this idea as much as you want, which is really awesome. I mean, you can make whole design for levels by using scriptable objects, and it's up to your imagination. Well, let's go into this part now. So what I want to do first is one step at a time. I need to add all these properties to a new scriptable object that we're going to call scene, right? Scene settings. Let's do that. So again, I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to make a brand new scriptable object, C# script. I'm going to call this thing scene settings. Again, just like before, by default, Unity creates a C# script that is inheriting from mono behavior. This is not right. We want to get rid of all this, because this doesn't make any sense, because remember, scriptable objects don't have those kind of events, and we want to get rid of mono behavior and change it to scriptable object. Yay. Next, we also want to organize ourselves. I want to, just to keep it the same, I want to go system.serializable, but we don't really have to do this. I'm just doing it just to keep the same as the other one. And the next one is, I want to add a create menu. So I'm going to say create asset menu, and now I want the file name to be scene settings. That is going to be my default file name. And I want my menu name to be equal to, and this is different, instead of game, I want to go to scene settings. Follow me here for a second. If I just do this and save, Unity will compile my script. And when I go back to Unity, if I go to Editor, and if I go to, or Assets, if I go to Create, you can see now that I have two. I have Game, and I have Scene. I don't have my scene settings working yet, but I do have those two options to add a new asset. I'm adding a new asset this way. Okay, cool. If I'm going to do that, this is going to get pretty cluttered pretty fast. So I want two new folders. One, Game Settings, and another one, Scene Settings. Let's do that now. So again, I'm going to go back in here and go into my, this is in my scripts folder. I'm going to create one folder name, which is going to be called Game Settings, and another folder which is Scene Settings. I'm just prepping now, okay, for what's going to happen. I want to make this clean. Yeah.
Just go back to the Scene Settings file.
Yeah, one sec. And then I'm going to take my scoreboard. I'm going to drag and drop it into my Game Settings, just to organize myself. And my Scene Settings file, I'm going to take and put it inside my Scene Settings folder. My Scene Setting file right now looks like this. It literally does, oops, it literally does nothing. It's just empty.
Yeah, I'm just kind of
So again, this is just the syntax for getting it going. That's all we're doing here. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to take all my settings for that switch case that affect every single scene, and I want to put it in here as properties that I can modify later. Does that make sense? So I want these objects, these scriptable objects, to be something that I can see in the editor and modify live, as opposed to me modifying them in code. Modifying them in code is they're hard coded. I don't want anything to be hard coded. I want to be able to modify these settings on the fly if I want. Okay, one step at a time. So I've got my container from my scene settings, and now I want to add some properties. Let's go and get some help from my game controller. Now to help me, I'm going to take my game controller and split screen for a second. So I'm going to take it over here and just make this split screen. And I want to look at some of these properties, right? So notice I have score label enabled. I enable and disable stuff, right? So I want to just grab all this from my start switch case. I'm just going to copy it for now into here. There's some stuff missing, and I'm going to talk about this. It's all red because this doesn't make any sense. For example, I know that there's also high score label. This included score label, live label, high score label, end label, restart label, and active sound clip. There's also a start button. I need that one. So I'm going to take the button and put that in there too. Just follow me for a second. I'm just trying to structure up my the data members that I'm going to put in my scriptable object here. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do. I've got my end label, which I have. I don't have my start label, so I need that. So start label, end label. I'm just trying to organize them so they're together. Okay, that's all I'm doing. There's my start label, end label, restart button, start button. Let's put my start button, my restart button together. All I'm doing is organizing my stuff on the left here. My active sound clip is here. But you know what? I'd like my active sound clip to be on the top. Like so. Score label, live label, high score label, start label, end label, start button, restart button. Am I missing anything? So I got score label, live label, start button, active sound clip, high score label, text. We're going to leave this one alone for now. But all the rest of them look like I think I've captured it all. These are all the different kinds of properties I need, except they're not really right. We got to turn these into properties now. So how do we do that? We'll make this one of type sound clip. So the first one we're going to say is we're going to say sound clip I'll be okay, is active sound clip, and I'm just going to put this back because we don't need this anymore. So that's the first one. So we're going to make this public. And let's see if you get what I'm doing now. Public, no. Public, score label, we're going to rename this to score label enabled. And we're going to say that this is a bool, because that's what it would be. Score label enabled is equal to false. We're not going to make it equal to false. We're going to make it nothing. Okay, let's keep going. I think you can get it from here. public lives label enabled. Notice I'm using camel case just to match up the stuff that I want. Bool. And we're creating our properties based on the names that we're using in our switch case. Let's keep going. So again, these are all public bool. So just to save time, I'm going to copy paste. So again, I'm just going to go one of these. And okay. And I need the names. So this is enabled. Oops. Enabled. This is, now this is interesting. These set actives, I'm just going to say start label active. I'm not going to say set active. And I'm going to fix this part in a second. And you'll see what I'm going to have at the end. I'm sure you can figure it out, but I'm just doing it for you so that you're good to go. Yay. Do you see what I've done? I've created data members that are going to hold all of the things in my switch case. Each of the areas of my switch case I'm going to have as data members. Now this is good, but what's even better is if I do different configurations. So for example, I want up here to break it up. I can use headers, right, for this. I can say that this is scene configuration. This is a header that's including scoreboard labels. This is a header that includes scene labels. And the following is a header that includes scene buttons. Okay, I'm just breaking it up like that so you see what I'm taught. So these are the categories. Do I have to do this? No. But I'm doing it because I want organization in my script. And remember, this is what's going to appear on the editor, just like it normally would if it was a regular class. Except it's not going to appear in the inspector as a game object, but rather in the editor when you create your instance of the scriptable object. Are you with me? And does anyone have questions on what I've done? Kevin, any questions on the Discord? No. This is good. Anyone have any questions or concerns here? How about suggestions? Anyone have a suggestion? Sometimes I get some interesting ones. All right, so then if we've done this part, now we're going to move on. I'm going to go back to this part now. I want in my scene settings folder under scripts, under scene settings, I want to create 3 new scriptable object instances. Start scene, main scene settings, end scene settings. Those 3. Let's do it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to Assets, Create, Scene, Settings. I'm going to call this Start Scene Settings. And I'm going to do the next one. Assets, Create, Scene, Settings. And it's going to be Main Scene Settings. And the last one is Assets, Create, Scene, Settings, End Scene Settings. Take a look at what I have here now. This is why it's beautiful, guys. Take a look. Look. In my start scene, curious. Do I need a score label enabled? No. Live label enabled? No. High score label enabled? No. What's my active sound clip? None. What is my scene labels? Do I have a start label or an end label? Well, it's obviously the start label. How about my start button or my restart button? Which one do I want? I want my start button. Now I've configured my start scene. See? A couple of checkboxes and a pull down menu, and I have my settings for my scene. Let's do the other ones. So I'm going to save this one. I'm going to go back into my main scene now. Main scene. What is my active sound clip? My engine sound. What is my, Do I need my score label? Yes, I do. Do I need my lives label? Yes, I do. I'm playing my game. Do I need my high score label? No. My start label and my end label? No. Do I need my start button or my restart button? No. And that's what I have here. Yes.
Into the scene settings file?
My scene settings file?
Yeah, the initial file.
All I've done is added headers. That's all I've
I
done.
know, well, it's not showing up at all, so.
Did you create your settings? Did you go create assets?
Yeah, and I have the object now. They're not showing the options in the inspector.
Like nothing?
Yeah.
Are you clicking on the object?
Under in scene settings, and I created them. All
Yeah.
4.
And they don't show up? Are they mono behavior or are they scriptable object?
They're scriptable objects.
Are they public?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna come back. I'm gonna come back to you in a sec. I'm gonna pause the video and then come back because this is a bigger thing. So I got to do a couple steps anyway. Does anyone else have any questions around this? Pretty straightforward, right? So what I have here is I have 3 settings. Start settings. You can see that there's some settings here. Main settings, and now my end scene settings. Question: I don't want any sound clip for now. By the way, the sound clip will change. Maybe I want some kind of ending sound. Like I might have some music that I want to use at the end. You know? Like da-na-na-na-na-na. Something happened. Something bad happened. You lost. That's game over, right? And we don't have a winning scene. We have an end scene or game over scene. Maybe there's going to be a winning scene too. We haven't added in. So question, do I need score label? Maybe. Oh, let's put the score label in this time. Lives label, no. High score label for sure. We want our start label, no. But we do want our end label, yes. And we do want our restart button. So you can see here that I've got some kind of selection of things that I want in my scene. So what these things do is it creates scene settings that I can add in for all of my different scenes. That's why it's a beautiful thing, in my opinion. All right, I'm going to pause it here to help people to get to this point. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes, right? And when everyone's on the same page, we'll come back. I'll put this up on GitHub the way it is right now, and we'll move forward from here. All right, so let's just save this, save the project, save the scene, close up my Unity, and then I'm going to go into here and I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and I'm going to say added scriptable objects for scene settings. I haven't enabled them yet. I've just added them. Git push, which should help people who are watching live. So if your scripts are working differently than mine, you can always go up and download my project and compare yours to mine and understand what's happening. Yay! And we'll be right back.